believe it. This is it. You just have to believe it even if you don't understand it. And I was not going down that road. I read, and I've even been mocked quite a few times, even in my face once, by a pastor who told me, you just showed yourself how big of a fool you are to tell me that you studied the world's religions in a period of a year. That cannot be done. It cannot be done, so you are showing me that you did not do it. I said, no, what I'm showing you is that I have some common sense. If you go to the refrigerator and you pull out the carton of milk and you take a sip out of it and the milk is sour, do you keep drinking the glass? No. You don't drink the glass in hopes that the last sip of milk is going to not be sour. You trash the glass and the carton of milk. Correct? That's all it took for me was a sip. When I tasted the sourness, I discarded the milk. And what I was looking for was the good milk. So, after all of this, I read some of the Torah, I read some of the Bhagavad Gita, I read the Bhagavad Gita. The Vedas you could not read in a lifetime, I don't care who you are. I read the scrolls of Tao, the books of Confucius, the teachings of Buddha. Not to insult, but I don't know why Buddha is religion. Buddha never mentions God. He does not mention God whatsoever. He does not even deduce that God even exists. I studied the book of Wiccan, the book of spells. I studied what is known as the Hagakure, the Bushido code of conduct. And what I found in them were a lot of beneficial teachings mixed with things that the only way you could believe in them was you take that logic that God gave you, turned it off. So I read a book about Islam in the public library. And the book about Islam said that Muslims, how many of you ever seen the word Muslim spelled M-O-S-L-E-M? How many of you seen it like M-O-S-L-E-M or M-U-Z-L-I-M? That's a very derogatory word. Believe it or not. It's a extremely derogatory word. And you hear it pronounced Muslim, right? Muslim. Very derogatory. For someone knowing the Arabic language, they know that that word is derived from a word called zulm, which means to oppress or to wrong or to harm people. So when you say Muslim or you say Muslim, it means someone who wrongs or harms or oppresses people. Whether that was intentional, I'll leave that for you to deduce. But it said that Muslims were Arabs who worshipped the moon god called Allah, who lived in a box in the desert in Saudi Arabia, and that they had many wives whom they beat regularly, and that the greatest duty of a Muslim was to kill a non-Muslim, and it was a religious duty, and if they did so, they would be granted with virgins in heaven. So I put the book about Islam up, and I said to myself, I've read some crazy religions before, but this one has to take the cake. And if I ever meet a Muslim, I will beat him up, and I'll call the FBI. But I lived in South Carolina, and I'd never seen a Muslim in my life. I seen some in New York visiting my dad, but you stay on the other side of the street, and they didn't bother anybody, you didn't bother them. It's kind of like bees, you don't go near them, they do their thing, you stay over here. So I'm fine. And at that point I gave up religion. I gave up even looking for God at the age of 17 years old. And I don't know if any of you know, but a 17-year-old who is frustrated with God and religion and his parents and all of that, there's a lot of trouble he can get into. And again, I am a perfectionist, so I was going to do the best I could to get into the most trouble I could. And I was very good at it in a very short amount of time. I started getting into fights was my big problem, because I had to work on my second black belt at the time, and I thought I was Bruce Lee reincarnated. I think I got that from Hinduism. And I was ready and willing to show anyone who challenged me that I could give you Kung Fu connection right on the spot. So, and I really didn't need a reason. I kind of provoked people to make me angry so that I could, get my frustration out. That causes problems. You're going to have some issues if you try to live a life like that. I got kicked out of school. I ended up having to get my secondary education, my general diploma. I ended up making a lot of enemies. I ended up getting into a fight with a young man on a payphone. He would not get off of it promptly, so I promptly made him get off of it. And that did not really work out since I broke the phone over his head. So I didn't get to use it anyway. And it didn't help that he was the son of a judge. So, yeah, it didn't work out well for me. That way of life was not working out well for me. I lost a 4-year scholarship to Clemson University to play baseball, which I had always played baseball in my life, and I had been granted a promise of a 4-year scholarship if I graduated with a 3.0. I lost that due to the arrest. So I was going down the wrong road very fast, and my grandmother she was complex. She had no idea what to do. She was trying to give me all kinds of counseling, send me to a youth camp and stuff like this. I ran away from the youth camp. I wasn't trying to hear any of that. There were two things that changed that and that bring this to the end. The first one was that I was coming home from a party at Clemson University. Since I got kicked out and I couldn't attend, I was going to make my name known at Clemson University. So I was coming back from a frat party, and me and my friend were highly intoxicated. And he was driving, and he fell asleep at the wheel, and we flipped the car over and over and over again on Highway 85 in South Carolina. And we totaled the car so much that it broke in two pieces. One part was in the median, the other part was in the ditch. When I woke up to the ground being up and the sky being down and the car flipping. And you don't really think then, you just realize you need to get out of the car. I've seen Hollywood movies that when the car flips, what's the next thing that happens? It blows up. So I get out and I drag my friend out and I take assessment of myself and I realize that this car is destroyed. But he only has a broken ankle and I only have a very small cut in my arm. That's it. We walked away from the accident. And when the state trooper came and took us to the hospital and my friend to jail, he told me, he said, "Young man, God has a purpose for you too. There's a reason why you're here today. I've been to too many accidents and this one, neither one of you should walk away from. God has a reason for you to be here. You need to figure out what it is." Because my grandmother told him the problems I was having. I laughed in the back of my mind. I didn't laugh in his face because I wasn't pushing, not going to jail. And I said, that God, if he wanted to find me, he had his chance. So I looked at my friend. I said, "God must have a purpose for you. And I'm just glad that I was with you tonight so we didn't both die." But I didn't listen. A couple of weeks later, maybe a month or two later, me and this same friend on crutches went to New York. We decided to go to New York. I told my grandmother I was going to sleep at his house. He told his mommy he was going to sleep at my house. You know how that goes. You all know how that goes. And we went to New York. And in New York, I went to go to the ATM to get some money out of my grandmother's bank account. She spoiled me too much. And I don't think they have them here, but in New York, the ATMs are in glass rooms. You have to swipe your debit card and then, the magnet releases and you go in and you're the only one in there. But criminals, I don't know if you know this or not, criminals are pretty ingenious. They would take rocks and put them at the corner of the door so that when the door closes, the magnets don't touch. Therefore, the door doesn't lock. So when you take the money out, a guy walks in behind you with a gun or a knife, and here you are alone with a guy and a gun and a knife, and you got money in your hand. You already know how that scenario is ending up. You're giving up the money. So I took out the money, I turned around, there was a guy with a gun in my face, pointing directly at me. One of my most distinct memories, I think. And he had the gun maybe 4 to 5 inches away from my face. He was looking me directly in the eye. I never forget, it's a revolver. And it may have been one of those little, the little ones, the little revolvers, but when it's in your face, it looks like, that Dirty Harry, the big one. Or like Batman, where Joker had to pull it out like this, the original Batman. It was huge. And he did not say, "Give me the money." He didn't say, "Put your hands up." He was really needing this money, I suppose, because he looked me directly in the eye and he pulled the trigger on the gun. His intention was to blow my head off, take the money, and that's it. He's getting that money. He's not taking the chance. So he pulled the trigger and the gun didn't go off. Whether he didn't have bullets, bad bullet, whatever, it was the will of God. But at that point, mine and his eyes both got like this. And we're frozen looking at each other, because what happens is, fight or flight syndrome, which is taught in martial arts, takes over. Your body is dumped with adrenaline because he didn't blow my head off, and he's like that because he didn't blow my head off. And neither one of us can move, and it may have been 2 seconds, but when you're sitting there, it feels like it's in slow motion. And the only thing I can remember is like a little guy running around in my head like, "Are you serious? You need to go, run, hit him, move, do something, because the next one he's going to blow your head off." So I think my martial arts training at that time, that I just quickly reacted and jumped on him and smashed. We both went through the glass door. He went flying, the gun went flying, the money went flying, and then I jumped up and I went flying. And I told my friend, "We got to go." So we left to South Carolina, and I did not tell anybody what happened, because I knew that if I told my grandmother that I lied to her, went to New York, almost got killed, a couple of weeks after I almost got killed, my father would just say, "Okay, I'll finish the job and I'll kill you myself." I know that would have been the end of that scenario. My dad would have just done it for me. He said, you want to get killed? Then I'll do it for you. So I didn't tell my grandmother what happened, and I started to have some very bad nightmares about these two incidences. They started becoming recurring every night nightmare that turned into what is known as a night terror. And I don't know if any of you have ever had a night terror. If you've never had a night terror, it's like your worst nightmare in HD. It's like your worst nightmare in high definition. You feel it, you smell it, you sense it, everything. It's a highly sensatory dream. And the dream was about these two incidences, the gun and the car accident, but they ended quite differently. They ended with my death. And it's very rare that you die in dreams and see what happens after you die. But in both of these dreams, I died, and I passed over into the next life or whatever, some type of weird existence. And there was something that was waiting for me on the other side of death that was worse than Stephen King could dream up in his most awful nightmares. What's his name? Rob Zombie. Even though he's got a twisted, sick mind, he could not think of these things in his worst nightmares. And I'll never forget the distinct smell of strong sulfur. To this day, rotten eggs is the smell that I remember. It was stuck in my nose when I woke up. And I would wake up screaming. And my grandmother finally asked me after a couple nights, why are you screaming at night? And I told her what happened. And she told me, God has a purpose for you. And if you don't see it by now, I told her about the dream and the gun in New York. She told me, if you don't realize that God has a purpose for you, you're the biggest idiot I've ever seen in my life, and I did not raise an idiot. So you need to get out there and find out what's happening. You're lucky your grandfather is not alive, because he would beat you to death here at this kitchen table. And if you don't listen to God, you're going to hell. This is his warning to you. So she caught me off guard. It's not even breakfast. I haven't even finished my eggs, and she's telling me I'm going to hell. So I tell her that I looked for God, I didn't find him. She told me, she didn't tell me to go to church. She didn't tell me to get back into the church. She told me, God doesn't go anywhere. You just have not found him. So I became a deist at that point in my life, which is someone who believes in God. They just have no religion. And I started to... Something changed about me at that time. I stopped looking for God, and I got on my hands and knees and prayed. This is how I knew the religious men of God, and all the religious books pray. Hands and knees, on the ground. I got on the ground and I asked God at this point in my life, God, if you want me to know the truth, then you need to guide me. If you want me to know about you and your way of life, what you want from me, then here's your opportunity. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You can leave me a message. I'll get back to you. But please, I need some help here. So I started to try to clean up my act, become a better person. It's not really that easy. You don't change overnight, but I was attempting to. And it just so happened that after that, few months after that, I met a Muslim who was a friend of mine. And I never knew he was a Muslim. I had been to his house on many separate occasions after school, and I never knew that he was a Muslim. And there was a couple of reasons why. I was at his house one day, and we were debating about religion. And I didn't know he was a Muslim for two reasons. Number one, he was African American. And I thought that all Muslims were Arabs. His name was Musa, but we called him Blunt. He was from New York. And I did not know that Muslims, along with their worshiping their moon god in the box and killing non-Muslims and beating their wives, I did not know that they could sell drugs, which is what this guy did for a living. He sold marijuana for a living. So that's why we called him Blunt. So I did not know that he was a Muslim. And I was sitting there debating with another friend. I have no idea what we were debating about. I was 18 years old. And he came out and he's like, yo, you ever heard of Islam? I'm like, yep, I heard all about that Islam. All about it. He was like, well, I'm a Muslim. I was like, I know you like to be funny, but that's taking it too far. You should be a stand-up comedian with that act. I said, but wait a minute. You don't really want to run around telling people that you're a Muslim. You know, that's not what you want. You want the FBI up in here. You already have enough drugs in here to put you in jail forever. Now you want the FBI following you because you're saying you're Muslim. Not a good idea. I said, wait a minute, you can't be a Muslim. He was like, why? He said, because you're black. He said, you think I don't know that? And he was like, what Islam are you talking about? Because I asked him, are you Nation of Islam? He's like, nope. He's like, I'm real Islam, real Muslim. I was like, you can't be. And I started telling him what I knew about Islam. He was like, man, what in the blank have you been reading? Because that is garbage, and Islam is completely opposite than everything that you just told me. I was like, all right, then you tell me about Islam. He said, I can't. So why not? He said, because I'm not the best Muslim. He said, I do good to pray 5 times a day. I try. I used to wonder what he was doing when he used to go and get that rug thing. But I thought it was just, I don't know what he was doing. Trying to keep the police from coming to his house, trying to pray to some god to protection. I thought it was Santeria or something, because I had studied Santeria and they do that protection type of stuff. But he said, but I do know where you can go to find out about Islam. I said, where? He said, come with me on Friday to the mosque for Jummah. I'm like, wait a minute. The only thing I heard from that sentence was Friday. What about Friday? Mosque and Jummah, you lost me. He was like, a mosque is like our church. And Jummah is like Sunday service, but no chairs. I said, okay. Church with no chairs sounds